always been the suggestion that people like Matthew will be made redundant by the onslaught of technology. And whenever that subject comes up, I'm reminded of the old story of the machine translation system. Had the English phrase, alpha fights out mind, translated came out of blind idiot. I don't think Mr. Muramatsu is going to make that sort of mistake, but I think it does indicate that communication is a matter that goes beyond words. And the Mr. Muramatsu is well equipped to enlarge on that.
Thank you, Dr. Leo. Thank you. Friends, and I'm not going to go on to Romans and fellow countrymen, but friends, thank you for joining me. And appreciate Dr. Bill's very kind introduction, and forgive me for speaking while seated. With this particular configuration, I think this is quite natural and energy conserving for me as well. Machine translation is one of my, not favorites, but one of the subjects that I cannot avoid, so I'll have some comment on it. But in the way of breaking the ice, this physical situation reminded me of what happened about 2 years ago on the lawn of the White House, Washington, D.C., when President Bush welcomed Queen Elizabeth. And that was an occasion when she said, the last time my husband and I came here was so many years ago. We came here to celebrate your occasion with a gallant disregard of history, referring to the War of Revolution, of course. To me, that was very interesting way of breaking the ice, burying the hatchet. But between the Americans and the British, I suppose they could say that it would take many more years for any Japanese leader to be able to say that with visitors from China or Korea. We must make every effort to expedite that process. But more germane to my position is what happened next before she said those words. After President Bush spoke extemporaneously, probably not with his hands in his pockets as President Reagan used to do. And when he stepped down, somebody forgot to slip in an elevator for the next speaker, the Queen. Because Queen is at least a foot or maybe two shorter than that Texan. And she was not seen from the public behind the forest of microphones. She was wearing, I saw the whole thing on a television, beautiful lavender colored dress, the gown, and a broad rimmed hat of the matching color. And press reported next day about the talking hat, because it was only her hat that was seen. The Queen, I'm certain, was not particularly amused. But next day when she spoke at the Congress joint session, you know the first word she said? Again, I was fortunate enough to hear that on television. Ladies and gentlemen, after proper salutation to the president, she said, today, now, I hope you can all see me from where you are. I thought that was very gently phrased. To me, had she said, now I can see you better, that could sound a bit critical of somebody who flopped the previous day. Today, I hope you can all see me, this short person. putting blame on her own lack of altitude. And today, I feel somewhat the same way. Though I'm not of the royal stock, because even with me remaining seated, you can all see me, I hope, and I'm comfortable in being able to see every one of you. I'm tape recording basically myself with the permission of Dr. Bill. So if any one of you later would like to ask a question and remain off the record, please indicate to me. I'll turn off the microphone. No prejudice to anyone. I like to listen to myself again, actually, seriously, to find out my own deficiencies in proper enunciation, some errors in phraseology, so that I can do better next time. Cross-cultural communication is the subject. It's a broad subject. It goes beyond languages, of course. But I would like to quote a few of my personal anecdotes or experiences in the course of my career. Simultaneous, as we say, if you would forgive me with Yankee pronunciation, simultaneous interpreting, which I began in 1956. So that's before many of you were born. I started consecutive, that is conventional, interpreting as a means of making living in 1949. I was 19. And when asked, where did you learn your English? I generally answer, under the Allied occupation of Japan. That was when Japan was still under the occupation, until the peace treaty was signed. And I'll make a long story very short. So I will not go into my earlier days, but basically, as a 19-year-old lad, I was ambitious. I wanted to get a job to support myself and my 4 younger brothers. And I wanted to do something with what little knowledge of English I had from the middle school. That is 5 years after the 6-year primary school. The job I was able to get was that of a clerk typist. Now, mind you, in the days before the word processors, being able to type with a manual typewriter, nobody had heard of the IBM Go4, let alone word processors. The ability to type 50 words a minute without a mistake among the Japanese population was a rare skill. I remember the first monthly salary I received was 6,000 yen, summer of 1949. Already at that time, it was at least twice or probably 3 times more than the starting salary of a university graduate, white-collar job. So there was an incentive enough. Then I saw other interpreters around me doing something neat, I thought, was earning twice, 3 times more, maybe 4, 5 times. And that was a good incentive. So soon, please go ahead. I'll bless you anyway. So I pushed my way into the job of an interpreter. And again, I learned the American way of getting ahead. I read books in the US military library, like How to Succeed in Business. I also read books like How to Date, and that was all theoretical. And in those days, they talked about first going into group dating and so on. You know, people were pretty conservative in the good old days. And I read about that you have to sell yourself, appeal to the self-interest of your employers. So I wrote a very, very official sounding memo, typed it in a neat prescription prescribed military correspondence form requesting consideration that so that I request that forget the exact phrase, but anyway, I argued that it should be in the interest of the United States occupation to give the undersigned, promising young man, an opportunity to prove his ability, potential as an intern. My American boss had a sense of humor. He said, all right, you want to be an interview. The next day I was sent out to the field, and that was the beginning of my career. Then I made an awful lot of mistakes, but never really an earth-shattering one. Amusing episodes I collected and jotted down in forms of my books. So I've written 3 books of those linguistic anecdotes. And later I wrote a book about cross-cultural encounters, mainly humorous events, misunderstanding, and better understanding sometimes because of interpreters. And books have been pretty widely read, and that's why I have become somewhat better known among our ranks as a public figure. In communication between cultures, as far as the languages go, in our profession, we have become keenly aware that you might as well stay away from word plays or playing on words. A very good example I quote that everybody understands is when back in the 60s, a Japanese minister for agriculture was entertaining his opposite number from the United States cabinet, Secretary of Agriculture. Now, when I'm here or in your neighbor country, Australia, I always try to remember that here your secretary does not mean the Secretary of the United States cabinet. Yours is minister, so is ours. And theirs secretary is your minister, and so on. So I will be very cautious in making those distinctions. But U.S. Secretary of Agriculture was the guest. And over an elegant Japanese dinner, the Japanese politician remarked in Japanese that your country is Beikoku. For those of you who studied a little Japanese would understand that the United States of America is written in Japanese using Chinese characters. 2 characters, Beikoku. Bei is sort of supposed to represent the sound of America, as the Chinese people use the word for beauty to indicate America. Beautiful country is America to the Chinese. A beautiful person is an American. We use the character for rice, which is pronounced Bei, and we use that Beikoku or rice country. It looks like a rice country, but when we see those characters, we don't think of rice. We always think of the United States of America. But this politician said, your country is rice country. We eat rice every day. Why shouldn't we be friends? And who interviewed on duty there, I was lucky I was there, was stuck. He was scolded by his wife. Why don't you translate? But this can be explained as I am doing now to you people, intelligent, educated people who may not have studied Japanese, but you can imagine and see why this wordplay was meant to be funny, meant to be an icebreaker. But through an interpreter, it is no reflection on the interpreter or translator, but there's no room for that kind of wordplay between the people speaking different languages. I do not want to discredit the puns. Puns are not necessarily the lowest form of humor. I think puns are extremely useful between peoples who are interested in each other's languages. They're tremendously educational and makes your language study all the more interesting. But they have no room, no place in cross-cultural communication. On the other hand, there are much better ways of breaking the ice with overseas audience or audience who do not speak your language. They do not, icebreakers need not be, in fact, often should not be a joke per se. Joke which is not really understood by another culture can be very poor in taste. And I can readily think of many ethnic jokes, so-called. Jokes with political tenor, or jokes that you cannot laugh unless you happen to be very familiar with what is going on in politics in the other country. Jokes with sexual overtones certainly are not very tasteful in those occasions. But there are plenty of wholesome, healthy, almost Reader's Digest kind of jokes that can amuse the other audience readily, and that is enough. When asked for my recommendation, I generally advise that unless you happen to know of a neat, effective joke to break the ice for the purpose of your conference, stay away from jokes. Instead, talk about yourself, sometimes your own failures, how I failed as an interpreter. And I always succeed with my own stories, mistranslations. But my stories are not as interesting as the stories of some of the better known people. Queen Elizabeth's remark, light-hearted opener, was a beautiful case of self-effacing or self-deprecation. To deprecate oneself has always been very much part of our customs. So it should be very easy for a Japanese public speaker to make a little good-natured fun of ourselves without embarrassing the audience. Former Prime Minister Miyazawa, who was known for his fluency in English, but after a few less than successful dialogues in his own native language, Japanese, with the press, having been misquoted. And you know the famous saying that it becomes misquotation the minute you wish you had not said it. Mr. Miyazawa has been very careful ever since then, and publicly his Japanese utterances have become rather stale, too cautious, and therefore not interesting. But his speech in English continues to be quite fluent. His English is quite good, and he's learned. He is full of anecdotes and is capable of pretty clever expressions in English. When he was introduced in one recent international symposium in Tokyo as a distinguished former prime minister, etc., he got up to the rostrum and he said, in fact, in Japan, there is an oversupply of former prime ministers. Now, that coming from a Japanese prime minister, ex-prime minister, or a Japanese person was sufficient to happily surprise the audience, to break the ice. So they will now listen to Mr. Miyazawa. There was another prime minister, that was Mr. Takeshita. So many of them have come and gone, but even for Japanese, it's hard to keep track of these names. So please don't feel awkward or embarrassed if you don't recognize any of these names. But there was one Mr. Takeshita for fleeting several months period. And speaking at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., he said, I think he said this opening part in English. I wasn't there, but the interpreter who was there was one of my former disciples. And besides, this event was broadly reported in the Japanese press. Mr. Takeshita said in slightly halting labored English that when I was young, I was an English teacher at the local high school. Please sympathize with my students. They needed an interpreter. And he successfully evoked a warm reception from the press in Washington. A similar trick was played by one of his predecessors, one Prime Minister, Suzuki, who was a graduate of a fisheries college, a sort of a humble school in the northern part of Honshu, Iwate Prefecture. People in the rest of Japan, particularly in big cities, used to make fun of the Iwate Prefecture. They used to mockingly refer to it as Japan's Tibet. That, of course, is not politically correct. And for the last 10 years or so, I have not heard that funny line, and I'm just as pleased. There's no need to offend the good people of Tibet. And anyway, Mr. Suzuki is, by his own expression, is a modest graduate of a fisheries college. But when he spoke in New York City for a big dinner meeting, I was interpreting simultaneously, and if I was speaking in the United States, I would have no comment about pronouncing simultaneously. But here, not to just to flatter you, but I think simultaneous is more broadly understood pronunciation. I would say I was interpreting simultaneously in glass front booth. And this is how I rendered what Mr. Suzuki was saying in Japanese. When I was in college, I was an outstanding scholar, excelling all my classmates in every subject except in English. Now, because so far, and before he got to that point, he sounded most un-Japanese. Japanese people would talk very, very humbly, self-deprecating manner. So he deliberately put on the air of speaking rather proudly of his excellence to maximize the effect of the punchline. And it worked very well. And except in English. With that, the audience laughed. And he went on to say, that was a bit embarrassing to me because he went on to say, that is why I brought one of the best interpreters from Japan, Mr. Muramatsu. I had to say that. When he said that, I must say that. In fact, I cheated a little. He said, the best interpreter. I said, one of the best. That satisfies my modesty and my ego at the same time. Because I think I know, the most of people who know me think I must have pulled that trick. But I think it's pretty much accepted. It's in good taste. A slight moderation, I think, would be in order. But at the same time, I had to maximize the communication impact of my client because he meant to please and amuse and humor his audience. It would not be for me to take anything out of his efforts to communicate. Interpreters should never take anything away from the communication between the clients and the audience, or add anything to it. What you should remain absolutely neutral, but at the same time, we should try to best convey the style of speech, the personality, the warmth of the speaker, sometimes the lack of warmth, because only then does the audience grasp the personality of the speaker. Now, I don't mean to be talking about only interpreters and the interpreting experiences, but much of these examples apply to our own communication. In our cross-cultural communication between the Japanese people and the New Zealanders, and I was visiting your neighbor Australia in June. I spoke at the gathering in Canberra, National Press Club, in fact, about the same subject. Same thing pretty much applies to you and even Americans, to you and especially with the people less familiar continents like Asians, Middle East people, and so on, that we should always be aware of subtle and not so subtle cultural differences. I like what one cultural anthropologist taught me. He used the word positive identification of differences. Whatever the label, I believe in having healthy, wholesome curiosity about what is the difference between you and me. Similarities are more readily discernible, and people delight in finding that. I went to New Zealand. People are people everywhere. They are nice. They're just like us. I'm happy to hear that. But on the next trip, I hope they will take a little more time and make efforts to find out what are the differences. And then try to learn the reasons behind differences. This week, since last week, for over 2 week period, there's this Festival of Japan going on in town. I was invited to the event last night. There was a buffet dinner, and there were many Japanese women wearing kimono to show their traditional costume. But they were acting, trying to fill their dishes in the buffet dinner in a way that to you would strike as rather rude. One lady in beautiful kimono stretched her arm out and reached for food right in front of me, when any of you would more automatically say, "Excuse me," or something. She did not say, "Excuse me," and momentarily I was offended. And then I quietly laughed at myself. Then I was being a bit of accusing myself to feel offended. I shouldn't have felt offended, because she physically apologized to me by bowing just a little bit in front of me, visibly, without any eye contact. She lowered her head just a little bit to indicate that she was apologizing for that gesture. She had to reach out. Otherwise, she would have to ask me, "Would you mind moving?" and so on. And in our culture, it is very awkward. In our culture, it is demanding you to vacate that spot. Rather than bothering you to do that, I would not bother you, but I'll just do it myself. This is helping oneself, self-help. So I was amused. I shouldn't have been upset. So I should be, having become somewhat internationalized myself, I should learn to become more tolerant to my own fellow countrymen and countrywomen. That was an interesting episode. In the same evening, as we were cramming ourselves into the lift, after several of these Japanese participants, mostly women in kimono, got into the elevator, into the lift, I should say, there were a couple, three apparently local people. They were near the door. When the last person got in, another woman, this one of the Japanese women in kimono, tried to reach out for the one button on the lift operator panel, which is always most worn out in Japan. Close, CLOSC, close button. The Japanese are always in a hurry. As soon as we get into the lift, we push the close button. We don't look out to see if anyone else is coming. We are very naughty about that. And if any of you have experienced that in Japan, I apologize. Collectively, I feel it's a collective offense. And being Japanese, I have no qualms about apologizing on behalf of 114 million other Japanese people. I feel bad about it. I don't do it because of my having become somewhat internationalized. I make it a point of not touching that close button, even when I feel the urge to push it, to get up 1-2 seconds earlier, because I know someone else is waiting up there. I patiently wait for the door to close. These are very long, 1 or 2, 3 seconds. But I smile at the other Japanese, always pushing that button. This is no joke. If you are making your first journey to Japan, please do watch the elevator panel. The open and close are often written in characters. They look alike with this character meaning gate. And inside the two little different symbols, one is open, the other is closed. It would be, for practical purposes, Greek to many of you. But the one that says closed is always worn out. You cannot read it anyway. It is quite true. So, have you ever been to Japan? Please remember that. Next time, watch it. Most interesting. And for the first time Japanese visitors to the southern hemisphere, I always tell them to watch how the water in the wash basin will fall down. Go the other opposite way around. We read about that theoretically, we hear about it, but we often forget to observe it. But it does, indeed. In northern hemisphere, I think it's anti-clockwise. Here it's clockwise. I think. No, I don't really watch it carefully. I saw it once, and that was enough. I know it's the other way around. So I like to have as much time as possible for your questions. I'm happy to answer questions. Let me finish with just one small chapter about my own feeling about this matter of humor as a lubricant in communication, cross-cultural as well as interpersonal. A few months ago, I heard a wonderful phrase. You save your worst insults to your best friends. I like that. I'm a student of cross-cultural exchange of seemingly insulting jokes, especially between your people and Aussies. With the different styles to different degrees, this kind of what I think may be called bantering, I think B-A-N-T-E-R, bantering, is practiced by many neighbors between the Americans and the Canadians. By the way, Canadians hate to be mistaken for Americans. Yes, we should be sensitive about that. To a great extent, this bantering is exchanged between the English, among the English and Scottish and Irish. The religiously rooted war aside, I think they are capable of exchanging these types of jokes. I have always observed with amusement your exchange of insulting sounding jokes with Australians. Your people all too often tell the Japanese, why do you go to Australia to study English? Come to New Zealand and learn better English. And your people have also tried to explain your history to us, much to the bafflement of the Japanese people, by telling that your ancestors came to this country on your own, on their own. Not the communist. But when we relay that story to Australians, many of them say, ours were chosen by His Majesty's court. And your ability to be able to say that about each other and without really hurting each other, to me, is amusing. Of course, I'm sure there are many subtleties that are beyond my comprehension or appreciation. But back on our own turf, it has been 44 years since the end of the war in the Pacific. And it has been too short a period for us to be able to do that with our Asian neighbors, our friends in China and Korea. I can do that with my Kiwi friends and Aussie friends because I have, over years, fortunately, cultivated many close personal ties with your people. I can say almost anything, and they can tell me almost anything. They can laugh at us about Japanese. I enjoy those remarks, but I can't say that with the Chinese people or Korean people. I have a dream, to paraphrase Martin Luther King, that one day we shall be able to, friendly jest insult each other. When we Japanese walk into the room, say, with Korean people and say, I saw this, I smelled the soy sauce from a block away. And reversely, we can joke about their smelling of garlic a mile away. And if we can laugh about these things, that would be great. It might take another 49 years. I hope it will take less, but it will take a lot of fence mending and mending the fence. The onus of mending the fence is very much on our part. And with that rather uncharacteristically Muramatsu-like serious note, let me finish my initial talk, and I'm at your disposal. Thank you. Is there a chairperson?
I'm really needed. Well,
If you can help.
I'm sure there are lots of people who have questions.
And please just tell me. I'll be happy to turn off the microphone.
In your experience, have you had any, or you had any experience about non-verbal communication?
Non-verbal communication. Yes. Yes. Many. I'll quote one case I'm very familiar with. That is the American case. I think Americans do this more than other people, using hand or finger gestures to indicate quotation marks. You don't do that very often. Sometimes, depends on the individual. Instead of saying so-called or what they refer to as, the speaker would simply gesture with two fingers. I think they always have to be the same fingers. Double quotation, indicating that these are not my own words. This is not what I'm saying about the Japanese, but many Europeans say this about Japanese. Now, when the speaker does that, the interpreters better be watching him or her, and so that we can verbally say so-called or いわゆる. Without that, it will be construed as the speaker's own harsh criticism. So there is one instance of non-verbal communication. Another I might add is the matter of eye contact. In most cases in our culture, when you are making a serious appeal to you, I had better be looking at you right in your eye. I suppose in your culture, particularly more so, but not with the older generation Koreans. I have had enough contact with the Korean people to learn that in their society, when a junior person, not necessarily younger in terms of the age, but in social status, rank, or relative degrees of scholarship, a junior person speaking to a senior person, let's see, I shouldn't pick anyone that's my older person, that would be impolite, but you are a distinguished professor at this university, let's assume. I do not know you, sir, but forgive me for picking on you as an example. I would not, a junior person, I should not be speaking like this. I should position myself slightly sideways. And with my eyes downcast, only occasionally looking up at you, making sure that you're not asleep. And I understand that is the old-fashioned Korean etiquette. And because I'm always curious about differences, I was never satisfied with that one explanation. Every Korean I meet, I ask the same question after the icebreaker, and get on to friendly conversation. At an appropriate moment, I repeat this question. And sometimes even more fascinating responses come. One thing I learned in this process was, Mr. Muramas, do you know that among the older Koreans, this goes even further. When you speak to or ask a question or make a comment to a senior person, if you're wearing glasses, you take your glasses off. Is anyone who's familiar with that custom? And my immediate response was, why? The answer was, in Korea, glasses are supposed to symbolize scholarship, knowledge, learning. You studied so hard, you suffered a lot of your eyesight. Your eyes are not good. Therefore, you wear glasses. So why should I boast my scholarship when I have to question humbly, obviously, for them? So they take their glasses. And he said, I was dumbfounded. I kept asking same question over and over. And for the umpteenth time, another interesting answer came. Well, there's another theory, this older gentleman said. In Korea, glasses are like hat. They're an ornament. Interesting. Therefore, we take our ornament off, like you take your hat off to show you respect. Interesting. It's non-verbal communication. I think it's quite fascinating.
I'd like to ask you about the use of the term digest. But from the point of view, to what extent it might be a term of integration in some circumstances, maybe not others. And also whether as a foreigner in Japan, one is not sure of how to act in certain situations when they sometimes joke about being digested. Is that an appropriate thing?
Very good question, actually. Thank you for asking. Gaijin is not PC, to borrow the American, what's the word, bad, not politically correct. Originally, etymologically, Gaijin simply meant gai, meaning outside, as in outdoors, person. In other words, anyone outside of our nation, our country, was Gaijin. Because traditionally we were a quite homogeneous society. Anyone who looked different different complexion, different length of nose, different colors of hair, were not one of us. Therefore, to draw a line, to simply make a distinction, people like you, most of you, were referred to collectively as gaijin. And in early Meiji, gaijin was a term of respect. There was a word, oyatoi gaijin. Today, it sounds quite pejorative. Employed or foreigner. Foreigner in His Majesty's employment. In early Meiji, it was a term of respect because we had to learn from overseas. We hired with tremendous salaries the German engineers and British railroad engineers and French language teachers and all these people. And they were referred to as oyatoi gaijin. And whenever people use that word, people spoke that word with awe. Gaijin had no contemptive connotation or ring to it at all. But over generations, it degenerated into term of endearment and then slightly chauvinistic, pejorative overtone was acquired. At the same time, many of those people who are so referred to found it convenient. One thing, it was easy to pronounce. And many people living and working in Japan began calling themselves we gaijins. You Japanese always make fun of us gaijins. And we were amused. And as long as, say, you make a mistake and you feel embarrassed, and if you want to offer an apology in a friendly jest, well, I'm sorry, I'm sure you will forgive us gaijins. As long as you say, I suppose it's all right. We find it a little amusing. It's ice-breaking, and no offense. But I, for one, do not believe we should go on using the word gaijin. Better word is gaikokujin. Gaikoku, foreign country. Jin, person from foreign country. And I don't even want to use that. I have been watching signs typically at the airport, immigration, overseas. I think you people use word overseas very often as a substitute for foreign. Quite good. Overseas is generally quite adequate as an alternative to foreign. At the London airport, for example, they have different queues for British passports and Commonwealth passports and overseas, I think, passports, overseas passports. That's nice. So instead of using the word gaijin, which so many people so refer to find offensive, because the word has been used too often to ridicule or to chide so-called gaijins. Gaijin wa shouganai. For those gaijins, you can't help them. Incorrigible gaijins. Because they call us the inscrutable Japanese. We call you those incorrigible gaijins. So the word has lost its original tone and became a sort of a slightly insulting word. I'm all for almost abolition of the word gaijin. At least there are better substitutes. Because we're an island nation, and anyone who was not born and raised in Japan, who don't look like one of us, I mean only facetiously, from overseas, why not overseas person? I suggested in one irrelevant newspaper essay, why don't we start a new term, kaigai-san, kaigai. Literally, umi no soto, or overseas. Since you are a person, kaigai-san with an honorific san. San, by the way, is a non-sexist term. Anybody, either gender, is san. So, kaigai-san, it's nice. I thought it was kind of cute, and I liked it. I was half jokingly suggesting it. And then somebody wrote me a letter. Mr. Muramatsu, my family name is Kaigai. I quite surprised. I didn't know there was such a family. So every time you people use the word Kaigai-san, I find myself having to say, yes, what do you want? Hi. So that had an interesting repercussion. But there are, so in speaking in English, I generally try to avoid the use of the word foreign. Foreign policy, foreign trade, these are pretty well established idioms. I don't think any of you find it offensive. But I almost never say foreigners. I don't have to say foreigners. I have to make distinction between us and other than Japanese, I would say non-Japanese people or overseas people. Typically in an international conference, where my colleagues and I are interpreting consecutively or simultaneously, the speaker would say, we'd like to welcome 350,000 delegates, foreign delegates. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we had no qualms about interpreting them as foreign delegates from so many foreign countries. Today, most of us say so many overseas guests from so many countries abroad. Perfect substitute. Not just in sense of being politically correct, but I think less abrasive to you. Yeah. Thank you for your very good question.
May I ask, given that there is a project on one side, the present time in New Zealand, you can talk about the differences in New Zealand as a expat in terms of people from the Kansai. I'm not sure the Kansai or not.
I am not from Kansai. In fact, I'm from Tokyo. Kansai people, in their own way, are rather suspicious of us from Tokyo. And people in Tokyo and its environment tend to sometimes look down on the people from Kansai. We have strange mixed feelings. On the one hand, we are envious of the glorious tradition, history, and art of Kyoto. And we look down upon the chauvinistic Kyoto people mentality. Really despicable, many people. And Kyoto people, strangely, are the first to admit that. And we look down upon and make fun of the Osaka people's mercantilism. They are really good merchants to many of us. And they laugh at us from Tokyo for our pride and for being unrealistic. They are more economy minded in their lifestyle. The famous idiom is Osaka people love to eat. Kyoto people love to dress. 今日の木倒れ、大阪の食い倒れ、Kyoto people die or starve from dressing too well. And Osaka people, 食い倒れ, will die for eating too well. Not necessarily expensive, but well, substantially. Tokyo people, again, are different. Traditionally, we mind how we look in the eyes of others. We will not do things that other people look down upon for. So we're too self-conscious of our appearance, disregarding utility or profit or almost anything else. So we have different values. But all these, it's easy to overemphasize these differences, exaggerate, or make fun of. But as far as you are concerned, I don't think you need to be too worried about these differences. Kansai people tend to be less direct in their response to, for example, to your business proposition. Typical Osaka dialect, Osaka idiom is 考えておきましょう. Kyoto people use it with slightly different intonation. 考えておきましょう. We don't use that in Tokyo. It's like, let me think about it. We'll think about it. This is no. When Osaka people, in response to your request of proposal for this business transaction, if they say, with a bit, very sunny smile, 考えておきましょう, means no way. We misunderstand Tokyo. There's constant miscommunication. Tokyo people like to be a little more explicit. If we feel that our answer to your proposition had to be negative, we will succeed. Or every Japanese does that. This is supposed to show modesty. So if you feel a little uncomfortable, please bear with us. It will take another century or two for this to disappear. It has taken the Chinese people a couple generations to stop spitting in front of me. Chinese visitors to Japan, Prime Minister and everybody, used to have their valet carrying the spit pot. And in the course of their dialogue with Japanese counterparts, they spit beautifully, perfect thing. But somewhere, somehow, they read or they learned that people overseas don't like it. The Japanese don't like it. So they stop. I don't think they do it. At least I don't see the spit pots. But so when the Japanese succeed, bear with us. So mentally block it here, bear with us. And the Tokyo people may say, すみませんね。うまく、これはお役に立たないと思いますよ。I'm sorry, I don't think I can talk. Probably more direct than 関西。関西people 考えてみます。京都 people, they're worse. I have my axe to grind against Kyoto people. If you visit a Kyoto home or family, even with an appointment, or generally, we often call on each other without any appointment. But again, good old days, Kyoto people are famous for, how does that go? I cannot mimic that phrase very well. How about coming upstairs and take your shoes off and have a bowl of porridge or gruel? お茶漬けでも、あとは京都。I'm sorry. お茶漬け is a bowl of steamed rice with something like seaweed or something sprayed over it and hot green tea poured over it. A quick snack to fill up your tummy. And お茶漬けでもいかがですか? Can you say it in the real Kyoto dialect? No, that sounds too much like NHK. お茶漬けでもどうですか? That's right. That's どうですか? That's important. お茶漬けでもどうですか? We take serious. We think we're being invited for a bowl of porridge. Ah, yes, I'm hungry. But I don't say, どうもどうもありがとうございます. We take our shoes off and for next several years, they are going to talk about you. In Kyoto, not you, I mean personally. That uncouth character from Tokyo had the nerve to take our words literally and get up and eat that bowl of porridge. This is the famous story. So in Kyoto, take their words of invitation with a grain of salt. So these are differences. Oh, one more interesting example of different accents are different. And because most Japanese words have clear vowels and there are many homonyms, the words that are written alike, spelled identically in Romanized spelling, but stress is different. Ashi and ashi. To you, this is sounds very strange to me. To me, it is ashi, right? You understand what I'm talking about. Ashi. Therefore, what was that? Pascal's thinking reed. What do you say? Ashi? No, ashi. Ashi to me is the reed, that grass that grows on the riverside. Thinking reed, Pascal. But this is ashi. So I once talked about Kangairo ashi. And my student in Osaka said, Kangairo ashi. The reeds don't think. The feet don't think. The reed, R-E-E-D. So there's constant miscommunication. hashi and hashi. Hashi to us chopsticks. Hashi to you is bridge. That is hashi to us. Hashi and hashi. More easy to understand example of the differences is the use of the word baka. B-A-K-A. Mind you, please do not use it lightly. Baka is fool. It is an invective, a word of insult. But in Tokyo, used between friends, it's a term of endearment. It's very much like the Australian use of between men, bastard. You see, how you might see your bastard is a term of endearment, right? But I'm told to be careful if you are referred to as such in your absence. That is not a term of endearment. But in Tokyo, among us, my classmates, my colleagues, we always use the word baka. Not necessarily referring to you, or you silly me to the baka da na, what a foolish thing you did. Or use that word to emphasize anything. Like fool. Na baka mitai hanashi. What a silly talk. What a silly idea, referring to somebody else. We use the word baka very often in informal relationships. But you don't use it. Ajo. A-H-O. Or sounds like a Spanish word for garlic, right? A-J-O. But when people from Osaka or Kyoto or Kobe use the word ajo, you know how it sounds to us? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever lived in Tokyo? It sounds extremely insulting. If someone in Osaka called me aho, that is questioning my intelligence or mental sanity. Aho is absolute idiot. If a fellow Tokyoite addressed me as aho, that would be cause for fight. But the same thing happens when I use the word baka. So I travel frequently between Tokyo and Kansai on the bullet trains. 2 hours 50 minutes to Osaka now. 2 hours 40 minutes to Kyoto. About the time the train crosses Tenryu River east of Nagoya, I switch my mental. Stop using the word baka. Because in informal talks, lectures, in emphasizing, for example, the rapidity or something, or in denouncing something like baka like fool, just like it. I don't use that. Very careful. So cross-cultural communication problems exist even within one and the same culture. So what was that? Thank you. That was very interesting. Hi.
I apologize. She said, no, it is organizationally challenging. Realize how much political correctness has spread from the English language. Now, it is very good frequently that the process of
The phenomenon, particularly in the United States. I collect books about PC, politically correct dictionary, mostly they are fun, but they serve useful purposes to me for matters that I want to be sensitive about. In interpreting, especially, we have to exercise our own discretion in choosing between the chairperson, chairman, chair. A few years ago, we could say chairwoman when the chairperson was in fact a woman. But now, even that sounds offensive to some people. And when a woman is going to chair a conference, if opportunities present themselves, we ask first, excuse me, what is your preference? You tell me if you have any preference. Sometimes these women chairperson say, I don't mind being the chair. Sometimes they say, well, I prefer chair. I heard a woman who said, I'm not a piece of furniture. So it's very difficult. It's not possible, easy to please everybody. But I think it's important to be aware of the concern of many people. The Japanese language, in a way, is a sexist language. This is sound contradictory because we have feminine speech and masculine speech. But many of the dictions can be quite neutral. For example, I can refer to someone named Fergus, whether it is he or she as Ferguson. Now, in interpreting this presents a problem. When the chairperson, next question, the Japanese person say, Fergus sensei. And in interpreting that into Miss Fergus, Mr. Fergus, if everybody's a professor, it's very easy, Professor Fergus, and let them worry. But interpreting into English, we have to supply appropriate title, Mr., Mrs., and so on. So sometimes we have gotten by saying Fergus-san in English. Let the audience guess who the chair was addressing to. Yes, this organizational challenge is, well, I think she probably meant to humor you or ease your concern. It was a very nice gesture. I've heard variations like when I look around and find myself with the least hair, I can say hair impoverished. In the United States of America, there are all sorts of funny suggested alternatives, like the white people are what? Melanin impoverished. It's funny, but kind of annoying. I don't know. We are in the process of transition. I think we're all trying to learn. The Japanese have had very little training or experience in living with people who have different physical features. And we have, I don't defend us as not being racist. We are racist to some degree. In fact, when it comes to that, may I consider everybody is racist, little bit. But civilized people try to control it. Or other people guide them racist. And Japanese people have been also learning lots of things. In my lectures, sometimes I use the example of the very, very popular American song in Japan, popular among Japanese people. Stephen Foster's songs about the old South, like Old Black Joe. I'm sure you all know that song. Old Black Joe is not appreciated by African Americans. People usually refer to as color, or Black American people, and then before that color, then before that Negroes. And quite naively, the Japanese in karaoke with overseas people participate, or worse yet, in one post-academic conference get together over drinks, Japanese participants started singing Old Black Joe in unison, meaning to welcome and entertain people from the United States of America. There was no one of African American ancestry, no African ancestry, but I saw one very distinguished American scholar not participating in that singing. So since I knew him very well, I went to him and asked, I suppose you wouldn't join in singing this song, would you? Yes, in fact, it'll be in fact in poor taste if I did that. So I understood that. So I learned. So elsewhere, I caution my Japanese audience, better not think or black joke in public occasion, because some people find it somewhat offensive. These are things that we learn from the so-called peace movement. Not that I approve of that entirely, but it has a very illuminating aspect. And before we come to the last question, I have one point I want to mention about machine translation. Should I go ahead? Every point? Yeah. That example was an interesting one. But machine translation or computer translation is rapidly become a no laughing matter. We used to joke about it. There was a classical joke that originated in the United States that with the earlier computer programs, software, they attempted to translate English text into Russian. And that Russian translation, machine translation, was machine translated back into English. What went in as my body, what is that? My spirit is strong, but my flesh is weak. A phrase from your scripture came back as vodka is good, but meat is foul. This is a classical joke. No longer is this joke told because this does not happen. That is why it's no laughing matter. The machine translation, as far as technical writing are concerned, work pretty well. Much to my amazement. I'm still a computer illiterate. My son is not a linguist. He is a computer person. And I have much hope in the next generation. My own very strong view is that computer translation or machine translation should be encouraged for text that machine can handle, like how to build this gadget, how to repair or service this refrigerator, how to reserve a room in Cairo, Egypt next month, and so on. These things, if you speak, for example, in an intelligible, machine-friendly language, avoid slang or peculiar colloquial idioms, speak clearly so the machine can understand. Machine programs can translate you from the sound into almost any of the major language in the world. That's the state of progress today. But should we put some of the finest literary work to machine translation? I hope not. The kind of text that we human beings, and if some feminists object to the use of the word feminine, human, I apologize. Writing that we human beings use, literally, kind of work that we enjoy writing, kind of text that we enjoy reading, I don't think should be put to the machine. They should be left to the human translators, not interpreters. Here I make a technical distinction. Translators who deal with written words, written language. Let them take time, consult their dictionary, thesaurus, what is that? What is the plural of thesaurus? Never thought about it. Thesaurus, okay, thesaurus. Or dictionary quotations, encyclopedias, whatever. Take time and come back with useful translation like Tale of Genji. That was translated by Arthur Whaley, later by Edward Seidensticker, both distinguished scholars of the Japanese literature and language, great cultural, not just language, interpreted for us to the rest of the world. There yet may be more attempts to translate Tale of Genji into newer versions. I think every translator, literary learning figure could produce a little different version. It's only natural because each is a work of art. I don't think the work of art should be delegated to the machine. And I don't think the day will come when the machine translation can hear a joke and translate that into another language and make the audience laugh. Because telling a funny story involves human contact. Speaker measuring the reaction of the audience and the listeners looking at it. As long as you here again, to be politically correct, I should make some reservations about visually handicapped people or visually impaired and hearing impaired people. We must always be mindful of these instances. But it involves very delicate human contact. I mean, in telling and understanding jokes. But if they ever, those engineers and scientists, I'm sure there are a couple of people here, please forgive me for making fun of you, but if scientists and engineers ever perfect computer translation program capable of translating and telling jokes, what should I do? I think I'll tell that computer, wow, Mr. Computer, ha, 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 that's the funniest joke I have ever heard of, and try to fool him or her and get by with it. Because I don't want to be looked at by computer eyes and have my mind read by the machine. That would be kind of frightening. So that's my view about machine translation.
I think that's a very good place to stop. I realize that we have to go before 5, but we're not to hope not to engage with downtown. I think now it's rather help. So I hope we can compare this before we get, but I think it's just finally to let it go. I'm standing there thinking that I've spent many hours, more than sort of think about in this room. Thinking I don't really enjoyed it so much. But it's not really enjoyment. I think as lots of information, lots of wisdom today. That I'm very grateful.
Oh, I heard you, Dr. Deal, tell our audience to put their names on the list if they want something. But if any of the audience are interested in reading more about the service or the anecdote, I'll be happy to send you reference or send them directly.
That's very good. So I'd like to, when you put the name down, let's make a note of that text. So, thank you very much. It's been most stimulating, and I look forward to joining you. Thank you.